Longer, brighter days. The weather turning. But what are you going to wear? Quince has you covered with a sensible approach to modern essentials. They focus on well-made pieces and premium fabrics, European linen, organic cotton, and denim that manages to be both structured and genuinely comfortable. Their spring collection is particularly easy to wear. Lightweight, breathable pieces that look sharp without trying too hard. Take their ultra-soft denim jeans, for example. Nicely tailored, supportive without being stiff, and comfortable from the first wear. And yes, the price does tend to prompt a quiet double check. That's because everything at Quince is better value than other luxury essentials brands. They work directly with ethical factories, so you're paying for the quality itself, not the label attached to it, or the middlemen along the way. Refresh your everyday with luxury you'll actually use. Head to quince.com/truespies for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/truespies for free shipping and 365-day returns. quince.com/truespies.
Content warning. This episode contains references to torture and mutilation.
Roger, that's over. Get there, Elmer.
Welcome to True Spies, Brief Histories. Season 2, Spy Cities. Our cities are the arena in which the great game of espionage is played, providing all manner of stage setting, from grand embassies to average-looking suburban homes. In these bonus minisodes, we'll draw on the knowledge of our True Spies experts to enhance your understanding of the secret forces that have always operated in the places we call home. I'm Joe Foley, series producer for True Spies, and this is a brief history of Beijing. (1626). A sedan chair is carried through Beijing's sprawling avenues, flanked left and right by imperial guards. Some onlookers get out of the way, others prostrate themselves on the ground. Anyone would be forgiven for thinking that this exalted personage is the Emperor of China, but he isn't. Inside the sedan chair is Wei Zhongshan. He's a servant, a eunuch, and a former gambling addict. He's also the most powerful man in the country. Even though he was still alive, temples were being built in his honor across China, and his elite network of spies was tightening its grip on power in the Forbidden City, Beijing's heavily restricted imperial palace complex. But within a year, Wei's body would be on display as a warning to any would-be usurpers. To understand his remarkable rise and swift downfall, we need to know about the origins of the power he wielded. Wind the clock back 2 centuries to 1420. Zhu Di, better known as the Yongle Emperor, had just taken control of China from his nephew after a bloody civil war. Incidentally, he was the one who built the Forbidden City in the first place. Zhu Di already had his own secret police, the Genower, or the Embroidered Uniform Guard. As you'd imagine, they dressed in elaborate uniforms, and carrying their famous embroidered spring sword, they could basically do whatever they wanted. Detain without trial, arrest whomever they pleased, overrule judges, assassinate and prosecute their opponents. But for the paranoid Emperor Yongle, that wasn't enough. The Genower lived outside the palace, had their own families, their own loyalties. Like Ivan the Terrible, who we met in the last Brief Histories, Zhu wanted a police force that was unmistakably loyal to him. So he founded a new secret police to watch the first one. He called it the Eastern Depot, or Dongchan. It was made up entirely of eunuchs, castrated men whose personal life ended at the palace boundaries. At its height, the Eastern Depot operated a vast web of spies across Ming China, from its sprawling capital to tiny villages. Operating under the emperor's direct oversight, the Eastern Depot often functioned above and beyond the law. Get on their bad side and you'd end up in the imperial prison, where torture was often the first resort. Anyway, all this brings us back to Wei, the former gambling addict turned Beijing spy master a couple of centuries later. Wei Zhongshan was born to a peasant family in a small village in the countryside outside of Beijing. Once he was old enough to do so, he developed a gambling addiction, one he couldn't pay for. There was no such thing as bankruptcy in those days, so Wei was forced to take desperate measures to escape his creditors. The young peasant took a knife to his own genitals and set off for the Forbidden City, which was always on the lookout for new eunuchs for its staff. When he arrived, he was given a lowly position in the palace kitchens, but for eunuchs, their influence didn't lie in formal titles. They found it in proximity to power. Despite his obvious shortcomings in the trouser department, Wei Zhongshan's life was changed by a woman, specifically the wet nurse of Zhu Yuzhao, the young grandson of the emperor. The pair of them became inseparable. Now, Wei was at one remove from the boy who would be king. After the prince's father reportedly overdosed on an aphrodisiac, which, if true, probably gave the palace eunuchs a touch of the old schadenfreude, the child took the throne aged just 15. But considering he was, the emperor of China, we really don't know much about Zhu Yuzhao. Realistically, he'd probably have been more at home in IKEA than the Forbidden City. He spent most of his time sawing together bits of furniture for his own entertainment. Consumed by his hobby, most important court documents passed him by. Wei Zhongshan took advantage of that. Using his position as the wet nurse's closest confidant, he maneuvered his way to the top of the Eastern Depot. He'd spent 20 years as a gambler, 30 more in a kitchen. But now, he was the head of the most powerful secret police in Asia, perhaps the world. The very first thing he did was expand his power. More arrests, more interrogations, more spies. His first major target was the Donglin Academy, one of the most influential schools in the country. Idealists who wanted to root out corruption, the Donglin hated the influence of eunuchs in government, and now one was virtually running the country. In 1624, a Donglin leader called Yang Lian took a list of 24 crimes committed by Wei to the Forbidden City. It accused Wei of falsifying edicts, murdering women, driving the empress to miscarriage, selling out the government, and accused his secret police of terrorizing the Chinese people. The emperor, busy with his furniture, wasn't really paying attention to what Wei was being accused of, but Wei was. He moved quickly against Yang Lian. Eastern Depot spies dragged him to the imperial prison and tortured him for hours. Over the next year, 5 more Donglin officials suffered the same fate at the hands of the all-powerful eunuch. He then shut down the school altogether, and by the end of 1626, there was nobody left to oppose him. Now without a doubt the most powerful man in China, people were tripping over themselves to please him. Architects competed to design temples to him, and rich men competed to pay for them. Before long, there were dozens of temples dedicated to Wei, and his sage likeness gazed out from statues around the city. In the background, however, all was not well for Wei. The emperor's younger brother had been watching the spy master accumulate his power, while the man who was supposed to be in charge played carpenter. So when the emperor died, it didn't take long for his brother and heir to move against Wei. A couple of months into his reign, he asked officials to provide evidence of Wei's faults, and hundreds obliged. The new emperor Shangzhen stripped Wei of his titles and offices, and exiled him to the far southern reaches of the empire, with a tiny fraction of his ill-gotten fortune and a few loyal guards. Shortly after his hasty exit from the Forbidden City, Wei received word that imperial guards were on their way to haul him back to Beijing for trial. Out of options, Wei checked into an inn, headed alone to his room, and hanged himself.
This spring, what will you be wearing? Quince makes it surprisingly easy to refresh a wardrobe, with pieces that feel effortless, comfortable, and properly put together. The kind of clothing that works without much fuss, which, frankly, is what we all want. They use premium materials, 100% European linen, organic cotton, and soft, well-structured denim. Think lightweight linen trousers, easy dresses, and simple tops you can wear on repeat without a second thought. Now, their European linen shirts are worth mentioning outright. Clean, breathable, classy, and hangs exactly as it should. The sort of thing that tends to get noticed, in a good way. And because Quince works directly with ethical factories, it's all priced fairly compared to similar brands. No middlemen, no unnecessary markup. All in all, a very efficient way to make a good impression. Whether or not you take the credit is up to you. Refresh your everyday with luxury you'll actually use. Head to quince.com/truespies for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/truespies for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/truespies.
So concludes our gory introduction to a city of 22 million people, Beijing, which literally means northern capital. That's a name first given to the city by the Yongle Emperor, the founder of the Eastern Depot and the Forbidden City. That city within a city, which was off limits to most ordinary citizens, ceased to be the center of Chinese politics in 1912, when the last emperor abdicated. China became a republic, and although the age of the Forbidden City was over, Beijing never lost its aura of secrecy. On October 1st, 1949, Mao Zedong stood above Beijing's Tiananmen Square and proclaimed the founding of the People's Republic of China, a new communist state. After that, Beijing was sealed off to most Western observers. From the Yellow River to the South China Sea, a bamboo curtain had descended across the nation. But that wasn't going to stop those Westerners trying to sneak a peek. Chief among them, the recently established Central Intelligence Agency. The rabidly anti-communist American government assumed that China was operating like an occupied country, that ordinary people hated the government in Beijing. So their strategy was to parachute anti-communist Chinese agents, many of whom had fled to Taiwan in the wake of Mao's revolution, back into China, hoping that they'd stir up rebellion. They called it Operation Merlin.
Well, the fact that the CIA thought they could just drop Chinese people near their hometowns and ask them to overthrow the government speaks to the profound underestimation that existed of, what was Chinese communism. And that, in fact, first of all, there's a lot of public support for the new government. And so people are not all waiting to be liberated, quite the opposite.
John Delury is a prominent historian of China and Sino-American relations. He spoke to True Spies in an episode called, appropriately, Behind the Bamboo Curtain, back in 2023. In November 1952, a young CIA recruit by the name of Jack Downey received a wireless message from one of his anti-communist agents in Manchuria. He'd made contact with a senior Chinese official who wanted to help the Americans, but to do so, they'd need a plane out of China. The CIA were experts at infiltrating people into the country, but getting them out was a whole other thing.
The solution that they devise is that they are going to fly in and pick up the agent, Li Juning, without landing. There is an experimental device that they think will allow them to do this. So the plane is going to come in, and when they see the signal that it's safe and their agent is there, they're going to drop a big box. And in the box is going to be a harness, a sort of backpack that Li Juning will wear with a long wire that he is going to wrap around two tall poles. And then the plane's going to come back around once the equipment's set up, and the plane is going to dangle a long wire with a hook, like a giant fish hook. That hook is going to catch the wire that's strung across the two poles and rip everything, including Li Juning, hopefully still alive, into the air without having landed. And then two guys in the back of the plane are going to operate a winch that's going to drag him up in midair, like pulling your fish in.
It's an ambitious plan. a skyhook, collecting their agent without ever landing the plane. But without knowing it, Downey's in trouble. His agent in Manchuria was already blown weeks earlier. He's been speaking to Chinese intelligence. The CIA officers prepare the operation, fly into Manchuria.
Then all hell breaks loose because guns open fire on both sides of what is essentially kind of a gully that they're flying through to make the pickup. Because it's flying low and slow, actually the plane is able to almost land. It's the ideal conditions for a crash landing. And so the two CIA officers who were going to be operating the winch to pull in midair, they actually walk out virtually unscathed. There's an incredible photograph. You actually see a dazed looking Jack Downey and a similarly forlorn look on the face of his compatriot Dick Fecto. These are the two CIA guys, and it's literally the moment of capture.
The men were quickly whisked away to a Beijing prison. It wasn't the torturous hell on earth that the imperial prison had once been, but that was little comfort to Downey and Fecto. They soon found out that they'd be spending a very, very long time in the Chinese capital.
And as time goes on, weeks become months, months become years. Everyone moves on. They forget about this. The CIA officially declares the men dead. And then suddenly, Thanksgiving 1954, this announcement comes out from Beijing, from the Chinese state media. We are informing the world of a trial is just completed to sentence, among other, these two CIA officers, John T. Downey and Richard Fecto, of prison sentences for subversion and espionage. Downey gets life. Fecto, 20 years.
The CIA's strategy? Deny, deny, deny.
How dare they accuse us of this? They must immediately release our POWs. You know, these are Korean War POWs who have been viciously and illegally held by the Chinese. They should have been released at the end of the Korean War.
In an unlikely act of compassion, Zhou Enlai, Chairman Mao's right-hand man, wants to allow the men's families to visit.
One of the unlikely heroes that emerged from the research process for me was Jack Downey's mother, Mary. She's an incredible figure. I would put her up there next to him as an American hero because, you know, she has to fight against her own government just to get permission to go visit her son in Beijing, even though he's there because of terrible decisions by the U.S. government to create this whole CIA operation in the first place. Her visit in 1958 to China to go see Jack, her son, in prison, is the first case of a U.S. citizen, private citizen, visiting communist China since it was created in 1949 with the permission of the U.S. government. It's just her love of her son that can't be stopped that gets her to go visit him.
For the prisoners, the isolation was tough, and as attention turned to the war in Vietnam, they felt increasingly forgotten.
He would mention that the prison visits were very painful for him. He seems to have adopted a stoic fortitude about the whole thing, and it seems that maybe for him psychologically it was actually painful. At least some of those visits seem to have been painful for him.
It took nearly 2 decades, but eventually President Richard Nixon and National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger began to patch up relations with Beijing. Richard Fecto was released just weeks before Nixon became the first US president to visit communist China. But John Downey still languished in a cell.
Downey is serving a life sentence. He was always in a slightly different category, and they're not willing yet to give up that card. So only one of the 2 men is released. So you think about it, when President Nixon is getting his special tour of the Forbidden City in downtown Beijing, he's a stone's throw away from Jack Downey.
When Downey's mother had a stroke, Kissinger sent one final push to Beijing to get him released. This time, Zhou Enlai obliged.
Having flown on an unmarked plane, uninvited, into China in November 1952, after over 2 decades of imprisonment, Jack Downey walks out on his own 2 feet to freedom. You can't imagine what's going through his head.
10 years after Downey and Fecteau were captured by the Chinese, more intrigue was afoot in Beijing. Something far, far stranger. It's December 1964. At the French embassy in Beijing, the Christmas party is in full swing. A young Frenchman working as an accountant there, Bernard Beresco, mills around awkwardly. Born in Brittany and just 20 years old, he doesn't speak a word of Chinese. Understandably, he's feeling a little overwhelmed by the sheer vastness of his new home. And if it wasn't for what happened next, his life might have remained obscure and unremarkable. A young man, Shi Pei Pu, saunters up to the Frenchman, pulls him aside and asks him why he isn't dancing. The two strike up a conversation, kicking off their friendship at what will turn out to be the most expensive Christmas party in the history of French diplomacy, and not just because of the wine bill. Across the spring and summer of 1965, Beresco and Shi, an opera singer by trade, continue to meet. It's not easy in communist China. Foreigners are treated with suspicion and often followed, but Beresco is junior enough to go largely unmolested. One day, in the shadow of the Forbidden City, Shi confides in Beresco, spilling a secret that will change the Frenchman's life forever. In China, the singer says, sons are deemed far more important than daughters, and Shi already had 2 elder sisters. If Shi's mother failed to provide her husband with a son, then Shi's father would have to take a new wife, something neither parent wanted to happen. So they made a pact. If they had a daughter, they would disguise her as a son. And so Shi Pei Pu tells Beresco that she was raised as a man, but is biologically female. After several more months of friendship, their relationship turned sexual. Then Beresco got the call that he was dreading. He was to leave China at the end of the year. Worse still, just before he was due to hop on the plane, Shi calls him to say that she suspects that she is pregnant, and that he is the father. It's 4 years before the Frenchman returns to China. Beresco tracks Shi down, only to be told that his infant son has been sent away to the Russian border to avoid suspicion over his half-European features. Soon, their rekindled relationship runs into trouble. As a foreigner hanging around a Chinese apartment building, he's accused of being a spy. According to later accounts, he tells the guards that he's come back to China to learn about all the brilliant changes made there under the great leader Mao. Full of revolutionary zeal, apparently, the guards buy this line and let him go. It wouldn't be long before Beresco would become a spy, but not against the Chinese, for them. In exchange for continued access to Shi, he agrees to pass secrets from the embassy's mailroom to a friend of the singer's, a man called Kang, who's on the lookout for that sort of thing. Beresco feels guilty, but his worries are soothed by his Chinese handlers. They often tell him that he's not really a traitor, since they're only interested in documents that concern the USSR, not France itself. But eventually, Beresco's material begins to dry up. It gets so bad that, at one point, he takes a paper on the economic development of Mongolia to the Chinese, who, as you can imagine, couldn't care less. Years go by, and the couple enjoy an on and off relationship as Beresco moves around various postings, before landing back in France in 1979. But in 1982, Shi, still presenting as a man, arrives in Paris to lecture on Chinese opera. She appears on TV, gives lectures, and is broadly liked by Paris's arty circles. But it isn't long before old secrets re-emerge. Running through some old files, the DST, France's domestic intelligence agency, notices some material on the relationship between a young embassy worker and the famous opera singer. 2 French police commanders climb the winding stairs up to Xi's apartment and charge her with conspiracy to pass information to a foreign power. Burisco is charged with the same. But after sentencing, Burisco gets the biggest surprise of his life. His female lover, Xi, is in the same prison as him. It is, after all, a men's prison. Surely the police would have discovered her secret. It's taken 20 years, but it doesn't take long for the penny to finally drop. Xi's story about acting as a man to please her father was an elaborate web of lies. Xi has been a man the whole time. Talk about the long game. We won't get too explicit about how Xi managed to convince Burisco of his female biology during their sexual relationship. You can look that up yourself. Suffice to say, the young Frenchman was inexperienced, and Xi had a few X-rated party tricks up his sleeve. All of which begs the question, did the couple's son exist at all? Well, yes. Some reports say that he was a Uyghur boy from Xinjiang, bought from his family by Xi to pull the wool over Burisco's eyes. You may have heard about the Uyghur people in the news over the last few years. Reports of internment camps, surveillance, and what 15 countries have called a genocide.
Uyghurs are a Turkic ethnic minority group in China. They've been around for centuries. There's about 12 million in terms of population in this special region known as Xinjiang. And what we saw from 2004 when I was based in Beijing onward from there was this increasing control, if you will, by the Chinese state over the Uyghur population.
That's the voice of Steve Chow, investigative reporter. In the early 2000s, he was the Asian bureau chief for the Canadian channel CTV, based out of Beijing. Currently,
I prefer not to say exactly where, partly because of the work that I do, which is often undercover.
As he told us in his episode of True Spies, The Destroyed Man, it doesn't take long for a journalist like Chow to figure out something important. If you're investigating anything in Beijing, you're likely being investigated yourself. During his journalistic career, Steve kept coming back to China's treatment of the Muslim Uyghur people. But finding someone with lived experience to speak to inside China itself would be nigh on impossible. Investigative journalists, like Spies, need to adapt to their surroundings.
I lived in a diplomatic compound right in the heart of the city, and it's where a lot of journalists actually lived. If they were very unhappy with you, they would let it be known that they would start following you. So as soon as you left the compound, there would be 2 or 3 people that would stay, say, 20 meters away from you, or they would be sitting in a car and they'd follow your every move, and they would jot down and note anyone you'd spoken to. That was the very overt message from the Chinese government.
Eventually, Steve found a source in Turkey, a country which shares an ethnic and cultural bond with the Uyghur minority. The man in question was called Yusuf Amat, a Uyghur who had been strong-armed into spying on his own community. They met in a hotel lobby.
He was so soft-spoken, and I thought, is this the spy? Is this the person working for the Chinese government, or was working for the Chinese government? While he was in prison in China, at one of these internment camps, that authorities told him very clearly, we are going to hold you in this place, and we are going to hold your mom and your loved ones in these places and torture them unless you agree to work for us and spy for us. And it was such a tough decision, he said, but he did. And he talked about the fact that men were often beaten with electrical cords that had been stripped of the plastic exteriors and were just bare wires. And he talked about how over time he began to report on family members, on friends, basically telling his handler everything that was going on, how many times a day they prayed, whether they read the Quran, whether they had religious sayings on their phones.
His family members, his friends, one by one they began to disappear, sent to the very same camps that he was once trapped in. Having spent years informing on everyone from separatists in Afghanistan to those closest to him, Yusuf broke contact with his handler and slipped out of China into the welcoming arms of Turkey.
In his eyes, you could see that he was the destroyed man. He, in the interview, admitted that he had a wife and a child back in China. Yet, and he knew very clearly the repercussions of him sharing his story on them. But he said that he felt he needed to because he had done so much wrong to others. That no matter what happened, he felt he really needed to make it right. And so I think we came to him at a point where he needed to unload, needed to confess, needed to do something for his Uyghur people.
It was important to Yusuf to appear undisguised on camera, a decision that cost him dearly. A few months after the broadcast, he was leaving a friend's apartment block when two men approached him in the stairwell, pulled out a gun, and shot him. He survived, but remains paralyzed. No gunman was ever identified.
In the time after our interview, I said to him, well, what do you think will happen to you? And he said, somebody's going to come after me. And if it's not the Chinese state, then it's going to be other Uyghurs who felt I betrayed them.
China's Ministry of State Security, the MSS, is the country's premier intelligence service, responsible for running thousands of agents like Yusuf all over the world. And China's Digital Silk Road, its program to export data centers, internet access, and surveillance systems across the world, might be making the work of intelligence collection even easier for China's spies. In 2012, China gifted the African Union a brand new headquarters in Addis Ababa. It took 5 years before anyone noticed something worrying.
In January of 2017, computer scientists at the African Union headquarters discovered that every night between midnight and 2 a.m., massive amounts of data were being transferred out of their data centers to unfamiliar servers in Shanghai, China. They even discovered that there were wiretaps under some of the desks and that many of their meetings were being spied on by China. The bugs were built into the desks and the walls. So it was very clear from the very beginning of this relationship that this gift was more like a Trojan horse.
That's Charity Wright, a cyber threat intelligence analyst. In her True Spies episode, The Digital Silk Road, she told us that Beijing doesn't just spy on other nations, it helps other nations to spy on themselves.
I discovered that the technology that China is exporting to certain countries in Africa and Latin America was being used by these regimes for invasive surveillance on their populations. But even more than that, China is sending trainers to those countries to teach them how to monitor groups of citizens, how to counter pro-democracy movements, and how to implement social credit systems like what China is using.
In September 2025, leaked documents revealed that Chinese firm Geige Networks was exporting technologies in the style of the Great Firewall, that's China's internet restriction framework, to Kazakhstan, Ethiopia, Pakistan, and Myanmar. If, as some commentators have suggested, we're already living in the Chinese century, that might be a cause for concern. I hope you've enjoyed our brief journey through Beijing, and if you're hungry for more shadowy tales of espionage with a Chinese flavour, there's plenty more True Spies episodes to choose from. You could try The Spy in the Cornfield, a story of massive intellectual espionage in the agribusiness space, or Chasing Chi, a 2-part epic looking at the FBI's investigation into an engineer who stole top-secret Navy technology for Beijing. Finally, as always, if you want more episodes of True Spies early and ad-free, be sure to subscribe to SPYSCAPE Plus at plus.spyscape.com. You'll also get access to exclusive bonus content like the Razumov Files, a modern retelling of Joseph Conrad's Under Western Eyes, and True Crime Caper, the Great James Bond Car Robbery.